This tutorial is for T6, write equations of parabolas in vertex form using properties, for Algebra 2. Again, there are three things we need to remember before we can dive into this section. For vertex form, we have two different equations that we use, one for when parabolas are opening up and down, and another for when parabolas open left or right. When parabolas open up or down, we use y equals a times x minus h squared plus k, and our vertex is hk. Notice that we'll have to flip the sign for the h. Then if our parabola opens left or right, we'll use x equals a times y minus k squared plus h. Our vertex again is hk, but the h is located here now, and the k gets a flipped sign and is located here. The third thing that we want to remember is that c is our variable that measures the distance from the vertex to the focus, or the distance to the directrix from the vertex, and both of those are the same measurement. Our formula for that is c equals 1 divided by 4 times the absolute value of a. So in this section, it will give us what kind of looks like a word problem. It will give us some properties of a parabola, and then we're going to sketch it, solve probably for a, and then plug in our numbers here to get our final equation. So our first one here says, write the equation in vertex form for the parabola with vertex 0, 0 and focus 0, 9. So the first thing that I did is I made a rough sketch of this graph. So this parabola has a vertex at 0, 0, and then the focus is located at 0, 9. So from this rough graph, I can tell that this parabola opens up, right? So this sketch will help me see if this a value should be positive or negative. We'll see that it would be positive because it opens up. So the next thing that I need to do is plug in my a value, my c value, to find a. So c equals 1 divided by 4 times the absolute value of a. That's our formula from the top. Then we plug in our value for c, which is 9. That was the distance in this graph from the vertex to the focus. So 9 equals 1 divided by 4 times the absolute value of a. We multiply both sides by this denominator. So 9 gets multiplied by 4 times the absolute value of a. So 36 on the absolute value of a equals 1. To get a by itself, we divide both sides by 36. And then it would be positive 1 over 36 because our sketch showed that the parabola opens up. So now we have this information for a. The other thing we have is the information for our vertex, which was 0, 0. And remember, this is our h and this is our k. So now we can plug these three parts in, the h, the k, and the a, into our formula. We'll choose this first one because our parabola is opening up. So y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. We plug in our a value. We plug in our h value. And we plug in our k value. So all we did here was we plugged in the vertex. Once we've done that, we can see if there's anything else we can clean up or simplify. We know that adding or subtracting a 0 doesn't change anything, so we can just leave this as y equals 136 x squared. And it's as easy as that. Number 2, I didn't write out everything in word form, I just wrote the two components that they gave us. So in this one, we're trying to write an equation of a parabola whose vertex is 0, 1 and whose focus is 0, 7. So again, I did a rough sketch here. I labeled my vertex as 0, 1, my focus here 0, 7, and all that tells me is that this parabola is opening up, right? So when I get to that part, I'll remember that it's positive, it's opening up. The other thing we know from this is we can find the distance from the vertex to the focus. If this was at 0, 1 and this is at 0, 7, 7 minus 1, the distance between these two, is 6. So we'll plug in 6 here in this equation, multiply by the denominator, divide by 24, and we know that it's positive because this parabola, our sketch, opened up. So we have our A value, our H value, and our K value, and we'll plug those into this one. Again, we chose the Y equals because our parabola opened up. Plug in our A, our H, and our K, and then see if there's any way we can clean it up. This one's an easy one to clean up because we just take out that 0. So y equals 1/24 x squared plus 1. So let's look at a few more examples. Number 3. They're asking us to write an equation of a parabola whose vertex is 0, 7, and whose directrix is y equals 4. So remember, we can, the vertex either way, we're going to use that, and then instead of the focus, this time it gave us the directrix, but what we're most interested in is that distance between the vertex and the directrix, or in the previous problems, we measured the distance between the vertex and the focus. So either one, whichever one they give us here, we're still just measuring that distance from the vertex. So I sketched it out, which told me that this parabola is opening up. So when we get over here, we'll remember that it's a positive A. The vertex gave us our H and our K. We went through our process here for solving for A, which is our dilation factor. So our formula, C equals 1 divided by 4, and again I'm just going to call it A to save a little bit of time. So C equals 1 over 4A. We chose 3 to plug in for C because if this was at 7 and this was at 4, 7 minus 4 is 3, so that was our difference there. Multiply both sides by 4A. 12A equals 1. Divide both sides by 12 to get A by itself. So 1/12. We remember that it's positive because our parabola and our sketch opened up. Now that we have our A, our H, and our K, we plug our A, our H, and our K into our y equals formula. We chose that equation because our parabola, again, opens up. And so we plug in 1/12, 0, and 7. We clean it up, taking out that 0, and our final answer is y equals 1/12 x squared plus 7. And we just keep on doing the same thing. This one has a vertex of 0, 3 and directrix of y equals 7. So again, this sketch helps us out because it shows us that if the directrix is above our parabola, then our parabola is opening down. So when we get to the A part, we're going to remember that it's negative because our parabola opened down. So we have our formula here. Plug in 4 because that was our distance between 7 and 3. So our C value is 4. Multiply both sides by 4A. Divide both sides by 16 to get A by itself. And we said that it's negative because it opens down. We plug in our A, our H, and our K into our y equals 1 because we have a parabola that opens down. And then we would get y equals negative 1/16 x minus 0 squared plus 3. We can take out that minus 0 and we will have y equals negative 1/16 x squared plus 3. Alright, number 5. A parabola opening up or down has a vertex of 0, -4 and passes through 2, -3. Write its equation in vertex form. So this one, they threw us something completely different. We've been dealing with, they gave us a vertex and then either usually a directrix or the focus. And now this one has a point that it passes through. So once again, our best option here is to sketch out our parabola. So we start with the same thing. We have our vertex 0, -4. So I've labeled my vertex here 0, -4, and it says it passes through the point 2, -3. So I drew a smaller dot here and just said this was a point that it passes through. But that actually gave me the direction the parabola opens, correct? So the other thing that it gave me is, remember when we were talking about parabolas, we talk about this kind of, this being the focus and then everything kind of goes in and down. think your example on flipped math, they showed you even how a flashlight works with that little point of light, the bulb in the middle, and then that parabolic mirror coming out from there. And so all the light bounces off of there and then flows out from there. So even though we don't have our focus, what was I going to say, in our written problem, we can figure out what it would be here because we would go over and then down. So our focus is at -3. So from here, a point here, it would go down, or sorry, across and then down. So focus is at -3, and so our C value is 1. Our C value is 1. Plug that in here, multiply both sides by 4a, then divide by 4. We kept it positive because our parabola is positive, or opens up. We used this version of the equation because we have a parabola that opens either up or down. We plug in our a value. From our vertex, we get our h and our k values to plug in. Then we clean it up. Y equals 1/4 x squared minus 4. 3 more practice problems for you, and then we're done. So in number 6, we're back to focus and directrix. So we sketch out our parabola with a vertex of 0, -1. I'm going to show you how we got that. Our focus, we have 0, 4. We got that from our directions. And our directrix we got at y equals -6. So originally we could only plot our focus and then draw like a little dotted line for our directrix here. But remember that the distance from the vertex to the focus is the same as the distance from the vertex to the directrix. So if this is the total distance, we would cut it in half to find where our vertex is. So our vertex lies halfway in between our directrix and our focus. So since this was 10, a difference of 10 from -6 to 4, then we would have 5 here as our C and 5 here. So our vertex is at 0, -1. So we were able to get that by using those two components. Now that we have that, and we know that our C value, we could have gotten it from up here and saw that that was 5 there, or down here, and we could have seen that that was 5 there. So C equals 1 divided by 4, the absolute value of A. We plug in 5 for our C, it was half of 10. Multiply both sides by 4a, divide both sides by 20, and we keep it positive because our parabola opens up. We use a y equals version because we have an up or down parabola. We plug in our a value, our h value, and our k value, and then we clean it up. Y equals 1/20 x squared minus 1. Number 7. The vertex is at -1, 0, and the focus is at 6, 0. So again, this is why it's so important to sketch out your graph, because look, this is our first one that has a parabola that opens to the right. So it's a great thing to sketch these out because I would put my vertex at -1, 0, then my focus is at 6, 0. So that tells us that the parabola opens to the right. If it opens to the right, remember that we're going to keep this a positive number when we get to our A, but it also means that we're going to use this x equals shell instead of the y equals shell that we've been using, because x equals is for parabolas that open left or right. We look to find what our C value is, the distance between the vertex and the focus. It was 6 to get to here, but we also have another 1 to add to that, so 7 total. 7 equals 1 divided by 4a, and then multiply both sides by 4. So 28a equals 1. Divide both sides by 28. A equals 1/28. Keep it positive because it opens to the right. Remember, our x equals shell is what we're using for a parabola that opens to the left or right. Then we plug in our positive a value. And then from our vertex, we get our h and our k. But please note that the h and the k are in different positions now because that is an x equals. So we plug in our h and our k, and then our cleaned up version of our final answer is x equals 1/28 y squared minus 1. Last one. Number 8, vertex is at 0, -5, so we plot that. Directrix is at y equals -4, so we plot that. Then we can see our difference here between those is 1. So we work through our c equals formula to get a equals -1/4. It's negative because it opens down. Then we're back to a y equals shell because we have a parabola that opens up or down. We plug in our a value, our h value, and our k value. And then we clean it up by taking out that 0. Y equals -1/4 x squared minus 5 is our final answer. And that's it.